presented to the congregation on August the 2nd. In this room, and Brendan Nielsen Diocese was here presenting that report. I think many of you would have been at that session on August the 2nd. So that report indicates quite strongly that there is some strong potential for St. George's to do some sort of discernment towards a development for its future sustainability. So the ARC, Asset Review Committee, has started its work to discern and find information to present to you and also to seek from you as a parish your input as to what future steps we might take. So this is the first step. We're not seeking decisions at this point, but thoughtful consideration on the beginning steps to move forward. So next slide, please. The Asset Review Committee for a Sustainable Future, it doesn't lend itself to be rolled off your tongue very easily, but the idea of asset review, we're looking at our lands, our buildings, what can we do with them, and also sustainable future is important because we all know that the future of Anglican parishes is going to be challenged as populations grow and age and move on. So we want to be able to sort of get ahead of that curve and see what we can do so that we can ensure that our parish, our congregation continues to exist and thrive and do God's work, and also to hopefully provide some kind of social benefit as well, which is part of our mission to do something outside of our own walls and to contribute to the betterment of our community. So as I mentioned before, Brendan Nielsen from the diocese was here on August the 2nd and talked about the WISER report. And so shortly after that, ARC was formed by Parish Council, and we've started to do our work, which is to gather information as much as we can to present to you, and also to gather information from you about what we might do in the future. And our first task was to develop 3 broad options, very, very broad conceptual options in principle about how we want to move forward as a first step. We're not talking at this point about what kind of building we're going to have, or if we're going to have a building, or what the function of the land will be, or what should we sell, or what should we demolish, anything like that. Just 3 broad options to consider now. So that's what we're going to present to you very briefly. So the next slide will show we've come up with sort of 3 broad options that from the least bold to the most bold, perhaps I could put it that way. And one option is, okay, we think St. George's is functioning fine. Look at this happy group. We don't need to change anything. We don't need to consider how the parish will sustain itself in the future. Everything is fine. Let's not mess with it. Option number 2 is, yeah, we need to think about what we can do better, what we can do to make our buildings here and our facilities more useful and more efficient. So we could probably do some work on our own, make some fundraising, do a capital campaign, improve the church, for example, perhaps even the hall wing, see what we can do, and then carry on that way. And the third option is the bolder one, which, if you will think back to what you've seen recently in the newspaper about what they're doing at the cathedral. Now, that's a major thing there. There are several more steps and a few years ahead of us, and they've got architects' drawings for massive, well, relatively massive condo developments to sustain the revenue stream for the cathedral and improvements to the church as well, including seismic upgrading. That's a big, big, big project which is moving forward. We're not talking about anything nearly as bold or as huge as that. Obviously, we're on a much smaller footprint here, and we don't have the central significance that the cathedral does, for example. But you can see a bit of the process they're going through to get to where they are so far. So we thought that we could consider as an option to have you think about doing something on a much smaller scale here at St. George's property. Do something with the land, do something with the buildings, work with an external partner, a developer who might buy or lease on a long term a piece of our land, which has value to a developer, and then that developer would create designs and architectural drawings, and we'd work with the WISER people to consult as well, and come up with some kind of a solution for suggestions for a type of building that could exist here which would serve our church, improve some of our facilities, and also create, for example, seniors housing, low-income housing, casino, no, not that one. Something that would provide a community benefit, a community center with condos above, that rental units, that kind of thing. And that would generate revenue. Developers would pay us with an ongoing revenue stream for the access to the land to build their buildings on. So those are the three broad options. Now let's look at them one by one. The committee has come up with some simple and short lists of pros and cons for each of the options. Now, you may think of many other pros and cons for each of the options, and we would encourage you to let us know what those are. And I'll tell you how to do that a little bit later. So option one, no change. Let's just keep on doing what we're doing. The pros, it's comfortable, it's familiar, it's the least amount of work, the least amount of change. Nobody likes to work hard, nobody likes to change much, so let's just keep on doing what we're doing today. Is beautiful, the sun is streaming in, why mess with that? The cons of that option, of course, is, well, the infrastructure is aging. The church is in pretty good shape, probably, but the hall wing may be less so. It might be nearing the end of its life. The parish demographics will challenge sustainability if we do nothing. If you think 10 years from now or 15 years from now, how many of us will still be coming to church or around, or will have maybe moved on to brighter places? So the population of our parish is not likely to grow. So staying with the status quo is maybe not realistic. It could be a con. The current financial situation here is dependent on the renter we have over in the hall wing. We have a contract with them until about 2 years, a little bit less than 2 years from now, the lease there, and we don't know whether they'll extend that lease or not. But we need to have a renter for long term to generate the revenue that keeps the church running now, the finances for paying salaries, for paying the bills, the lights, the heat, and all that sort of stuff. So that's option number one. Option number two, possible change, but still keep parish control. Do something that's capital in nature. We can do a project like we've done before to improve the facilities here. We've done the narthex, we've done the commercial kitchen. We can do a big project like that again. That way we control the pace of change and the amount of change. Our land remains our land, our buildings remain our buildings. We're not selling or leasing them to an external partner. We control what we do here and who uses the facilities here. Now, the cons for this option is we may not have the capacity, both human and financial, to undertake a major project at this time. And a major project, if it's going to be a renovation of either of the buildings, would be costly in who knows how many millions to do serious renovations here. And it may be that the existing hall wing, if that's the building we wanted to renovate, may be too old and to justify sinking a lot of money into it for the short term. We haven't done depreciation reports, but that would be a step we'd have to take, and we may find out that it doesn't make any sense to sink a lot of money into renovating and improving and upgrading that building because it's too old and near the end of its useful life. And also doing this step would require diocesan approval for that kind of expenditure, even if it's money that we raise ourselves. And that kind of a capital project has to be approved by the diocese as long as it has a link to some sort of mission, and might be a little difficult to justify what the mission would be if it's just sort of improving the facilities for what we're already doing. So that might be a challenge. So the third possible option is the admittedly bolder one, which is, yes, let's look to the future and work with an external partner to, as we've said, build something that will be controlled by a property developer, for example, and that would make them money, and it would also guarantee a revenue stream for us long term. If the agreement with that developer was a 50-year lease, for example, they would make their money from their rentals or their sales. They would we would negotiate an amount for the church that would come to us to keep on paying the bills and the salaries, the things that we need to keep the church alive and running. And so the pros on this option is we decide our future, but someone else does all the work. We're not going to be building buildings ourselves. We're not going to become property managers. We're not going to become real estate developers. We're not going to become contractors. We have people that do that work, but we decide what it is we want done here. This step would align very closely with diocesan priorities, as I mentioned, the wishes of the bishop. And there are a number of parishes that are starting on the process themselves of doing something like this, and it's going to be supported by the diocese quite clearly. There is the potential for long-term financial stability for the church, as we've mentioned. And provincial and municipal policies these days are very supportive of this kind of development, particularly if we decide on something that's housing related, whether it's seniors housing, geared to income housing, anything like that. Housing needs are already identified by municipalities, and now, of course, we all know that the provincial government is kicking the municipality in the pants and tell them, get moving. We're going to fast track approvals for any kind of housing developments in your municipalities, including here in Saanich. So the cons of this process is that we'd have to give up some control. We'd be giving up ownership of some part of our land or assets to a developer who's going to build here, who agrees to build here. Now, I've got as a con, diocesan approval is required, but there's an asterisk beside that because we kind of think that the diocese would actually be supportive of us and help us get that approval. There would be steps to follow, but the words we're hearing from the diocese is that they are supportive of this kind of a process. There would be some capital investment required by our church, probably much less so than option number 2, because it wouldn't have to do a major capital project. There would be expenses early on to pay for things like depreciation reports on our buildings, to pay for zoning change applications along the line, and there might be some other costs that would be involved that we would have to have some input into. But there are funds available from the diocese, we are told, to help parishes cover those costs. There was a church in Strawberry Vale, I forget the name, anybody know the name of that one? St. Columbo's, I think, that was sold recently, and the diocese gained $700,000 from the sale of that property, and they have that set aside as a fund to help parishes go through these financial cost processes to move in the direction of a capital campaign. So either in the form of loans or grants, there are supports from the diocese for this kind of a step. Another con is that there would be potential for significant change in the appearance and function of what we have here on the land. And those kinds of changes, big changes that are visible and noticeable, do put some people off. I remember when we went through the process of getting the Narthex building built, the Narthex addition, there were people who just did not like what it looked like, did not like what it did to what the old image of the church was, a nice little country church, and then you have this thing on the front. That kind of change does disturb people, so there will be possibly a building here somewhere, and there'll be the Orchard residents to consider. It'll be possibly close to them, so we'd have to figure out how to get past this, getting used to the idea there's going to be a different physical look and feel about this property that we own here. There was one other pro that I missed. I didn't mention potential to make a difference in the community, which is what we're called to do. So if you had a community function here, as well as real estate, whether it's a senior center or something like the Monterey Center, something like that kind of a thing, or a daycare center, those kinds of community amenities that would also help us to get out into the community and make St. George's a hub. So pros and cons of the 3 possible options. I won't say any more about them. I probably talked too much anyways already. Next steps. So we want you to start thinking about these options that we've put up here. You can give us some questions when we're done today, but we're not here to conduct a lengthy interactive town hall session, because the questions you might have at this early stage are likely to be questions that we don't know the answers to at this point. But we want you to think about these options and discuss them amongst yourselves. Come up with questions, come up with ideas, come up with suggestions, come up with what are you talking about when you're talking about this X, Y, or Z, and send those questions and comments to this email address, this dedicated email address, the arc@stgeorgecadbrobay.ca. We want you to send them there as much as you can, because we want to document them all and collect them all and compile them all and report then back to the community on all the questions, ideas, and comments that we've received. So, and we'll gather those things over the next couple of months. We're going to continue to gather information not only from you, but from the diocese. I'm in touch with Brendan Nielsen fairly regularly, asking him questions. How does this process work? How does that process work? All that. And we're going to give you information on an ongoing basis as we get it. We're planning a town hall meeting for the 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock people together sometime in February. We've tentatively scheduled February the 4th for that, where we would have a much more informed discussion after all this information is shared amongst us. And then there will be a survey that we're going to design and submit to all of the parish members, a questionnaire asking the kind of pertinent questions to find out from you, to tease out from you what your wishes and desires are, because the decision is made by you, not by the diocese, not by a developer, not by a real estate agent. What we do moving forward is going to be decided by us. So that's what we're trying to discern, and that's the purpose of our committee. After the survey results are compiled and shared, the committee will report on the work that it's done and what it's heard, and then potentially a special general meeting also early in the spring to come up with a decision on the options to move forward. When that happens, the work of this committee is pretty much over. The idea being, if option 3 is chosen, another committee would be formed, which would actually be given the task of, okay, this is what the parish has decided it wants to do. Now your committee has to start working with Wiser, working with the diocese, working with the architects, and developing ideas to put forward for decisions on what the future might be in that process. So that's what we've got planned for the next couple of months. We're also wanting to make sure you have access to information, whatever information you want. This document here is on setting sail this week. If you go into setting sail and look for the announcement for this morning's meeting, there's a red button that says read the document here. That document will be there. That document will also be on the Asset Review Committee website of St. George's. Some of you may not be familiar with it. If you go to St. George's website, there's a link that says Ministries, and under the Ministries list, one of those ministries is the Asset Review Committee. And we're populating that website with all the information we get, including this document, and we will continue to do so. So that will be the place to go, and that website we hope will be quite robust with all the information that is available to date. We'll be updating that regularly. So I think that's all I have to say. Committee members, did I err or stray or omit anything important? So again, options for you to think about. The decisions will be made by you as a community of faith, and it's important because the future of not just our parish, but of the Anglican diocese here is going to rest largely on the decisions that parishes like us make about how we're going to continue to be able to function and do God's work. So we will certainly welcome a few questions now, if there are any. Somebody mentioned about this morning about the emails that we're asking you to send to the email address there. How will people know what other people have asked by email and what the answers were? So that was a good question. So we will either do something like a frequently asked questions link on the website, or we'll say, somebody asked this question, and here was the answer, so that everybody can see that. And then you don't have to ask the question if somebody else has already asked it, because, you might have a question and you don't know if it's already been asked by someone else. So we're going to do our best to populate the website with all of those questions and answers so you can see it ongoing in real time. But we do want, as much as possible, for those questions and comments to go to the email address so that we can compile and collate them all and then report back on them. But if there's any questions today, feel free. Gary has a microphone which he'll pass around. If you have any really difficult questions, Marilyn and Leslie are going to answer them. The easy ones I'll answer. So. Oh. That was an easy question. Let's keep them coming like that.
You keep talking about our land. It isn't really ours, is it? It belongs to the diocese.
Belongs to the diocese, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need to have some clarity on that.
Yeah, true.
Everybody would understand.
I just had a question about needs of the community and whether they're in the local area plan or Cabra Bay Residents Association, if that information might be available through other sources.
In the WISER report that was done and presented in August, they have done what they call a property evaluation matrix overview, where they talk about various components of building something and whether they are favorable or not favorable. One of the components is community and cultural significance, and WISER declares that to be high for doing a project like that here at St. George's, and it explains that. The redevelopment potential is high. The community planning and context is high, and the buildings and site context is high according to the WISER report. By the way, we will also put the WISER report as a PDF on the ARC website. We'll get that done this week, so you can look into that in more detail.
So you mentioned that the need is high. The need is high for, does it give any more direction on that? Social housing, seniors?
There are zoning, I probably don't know all the answers to these questions, but you look at that document and it refers to some of those things about, yes, there is a need, as well as a commitment by Saanich in their official community plan, and by Cabra Bay in their local area plan for more housing, for seniors, for regular people at market rates, for low cost housing. There's a variety. It didn't specify a priority because housing of all kinds is needed here in Saanich.
Just one maybe follow-up comment to that is, we do have, but haven't looked in detail yet at the local area plan for that. So that's the type of information we intend to gather over the coming weeks. What are the needs of the community? What do other people think about that? And that would all then be funneled back to you guys to help with the decision-making process.
But the decision-making process of this committee will not be, we have decided as a community to build a seniors housing center, or to build a low-income housing community, or to build, the decision is to build in principle, something that would be real estate related and provide revenues for the church. The next phase would be where we look at, here are options of different kinds of housing, or community centers, a mix thereof, and we would then have a chance to consider all of those, and we would be able to make a decision with advice and guidance from WISER and the diocese, and we would choose at that stage, at a later stage. So the decision on what would be built is at a later stage. This decision now we're asking you to make is just an in-principle decision.
What is the current zoning?
Hold it up to your mouth.
What is the zoning of this property?
The zoning is mixed-use residential, commercial. I believe, Leslie, you found out that it's already zoned to have apartment or condo buildings of 3 or 4 stories. But it is not restrictive. It is quite supportive of what we have potentially in mind for a building that would have 20, 30, 40 units, not a 12-story condo tower. But we have to go through a process of making sure that the zoning regulation is compatible before any decisions can be made. And you know, if we have to make it an application to change zoning, there's a process to do that as well. So.
John, I want to thank you for a very logical presentation. It's been well done.
Thank you.
I have had several people ask me about the security of our memorial garden in terms of development of this property. And my understanding is that that is protected, any burial situation. But I just wonder if you can just assure people that that's not a problem.
If we want that to be protected, it shall be protected. We're not going to let a developer come in here and steamroll through something like that. So
No, but I think it's actually legally protected.
it
But
probably
I
is.
leave that with you.
I don't know, but
I think
it
there's
probably
concern.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be non-negotiable as far as I'm concerned. John. Uh-oh, it's Ian. It's going to be a tough question.
First of all, I think your committee's done a good job.
Oh, thank you.
So there.
Well, you said great and then you said good, so.
Well, John, you and I know about the great and the good, so don't worry about it. I'm querying the zoning. I had a quick chat with Leslie outside, and she told me about that. I think it's P1, which is public assembly. But that can be checked up. Also, the Wiser Group, I've seen the report. The August 2nd meeting was between the Parish Council and the Board of the Orchard. And I've read the Wiser report a couple of times. It's based predominantly on the local area plan. And as we all know, local area plans have now been abolished by statute as of last week. And the community plans have been abolished by statute. So it's much more of a free-for-all, and I think a lot of the municipalities are going to have to go back to the drawing board to do that. But it doesn't, none of that really takes away from what the excellent work this committee has done. It's just the playing field is not quite the same as it was when the Wiser report came out.
I mean, the signals are, we're hoping that with the added pressure from the provincial government is that the local area plans and the official community reports will be even enhanced and encouraged more strongly to open up to more development, particularly with respect to housing. So, but you're right, it's still a little murky, because what do you do when you throw out a community plan and you don't have a guiding principles to follow? So, but that's a good point. Gary? Front row?
I've got a very loud voice, but
Hi. Yeah, so I think I just want to, oh, can you hear me better now? I just want to reemphasize some of the things that people have already said to help us really focus. I think that what Jeanette mentioned is really important that people remember, is that they're not our lands and they're not our assets. They're the diocesan assets. This is an opportunity for us to help direct the use of those assets, and also to support our parish goals and visions of what we want to be as a parish and what sort of impact we want to have on the community in which we meet. So I think I agree with Ian that the community plans, et cetera, have been trumped, let's say, by the new legislation. But of course, that document, that initial document, is still important to understand what the community did envision and what the goals of the community were before the legislation, but also to recognize the needs that the legislation attempts to address. So it's about remembering why we're going through this process and being clear about what the process is, but also seeing that this is an opportunity for us as a parish to try and have a positive impact on the community in which we meet, taking all of those needs in mind. So,
Thank you. Yeah. A question was asked at 8 o'clock as well, to not counter, but complement that question. And the question was, to what extent might this project impact or get in the way of what are we called to be doing in Jesus' name? I don't think that there's a conflict between these two priorities, but the point was well made that we do have to constantly think about what is our mission here? What work are we doing for God? And hopefully a win-win situation would emerge that we can do something like this and even enhance our work as a faith community, not just for us, but also for the broader community as well. So it was a good point to remember those things.
I came to this parish because I was allowed to come from Ontario. I think it's important that there should be strong leadership, especially if we could have low-income poor people, students who have spent so much money on getting educated. Thank you.
Thank you. We hope we've given you enough to take home and mull over and think about, and provide us, that's gone now, but provide us with your input and feedback to that email address. Typically in meetings like this, people go away and they think of something afterwards, I wish I'd asked that, so please feel free to do that. And if you think we're not providing enough information on the website quickly enough, let us know. Some wheels turn a little slowly, but we'll do our best to get information that is requested as quickly as we can and keep everybody updated. Yes.
If we think that something would be good to add to your website, can we just send it to you or, through that email? And
Yeah.
say, hey, how about you download this or whatever, give you the link.
Yeah, there was a suggestion this morning, somebody saying, well, instead of just waiting until you've compiled frequently asked questions, just any question could be put up there that somebody might be thinking of the same thing. So, we're not going to be putting questions up there every single day, but we'll, do it in a scheduled way. But anything that you want to provide. One thing I think I mentioned, if you look at those three options and the pros and cons, you might think of some pros or cons for either of them that you think might be valuable for us to consider. So, send us those ideas too. The committee thanks you for your attention and for obviously your interest. You've all stayed behind and we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, John. That was very well presented. You did a great job of that. I wanted to mention, one of our sons is a city planner, and he's just, he was working for the city of Burnaby, but he's moved to a non-profit organization called Small Housing BC.